Welcome back to Story Time and Music History 101 with Kurt Thompson. We are still making our way through, Baroque period. I guess we're heading towards classical period. Actually, we're kind of there right now, basically. Let's see, where are we? We were actually just right into the classical period with a guy named HAYDN. HAYDN. Now, HAYDN had neither the flashy individuality of Mozart nor the brooding romantic passion of Beethoven. He was more of a middle management type. HAYDN did spend a few years struggling to make ends meet as a young man in Vienna. Wow, he lived in a garret and everything. But he spent most of his life, nearly 50 years, at the same job, which offered him creative scope and financial security. He was 24 years older than Mozart, yet outlived him by 18 years. And until his very last years, he enjoyed, unlike Beethoven, good health. Kind of picture they had of him hiding there. He spent his final years in a well-deserved peaceful retirement in comfortable surroundings and with a private stock of his favorite wine, a Tokay. HAYDN died in 1809 at 77 years of age. Now that's old for back then. He didn't have all the great health care that we do now. Okay, and he had money in the bank and a wardrobe full of nice clothes. If his love life had gone better, he would have been even happier. HAYDN was born into a simple peasant family in the little Austrian village of Rohrau, near the border with Hungary, in 1732. His father was a second-generation wheelwright, and his mother was a cook. They christened their son Franz Joseph, but around the house they called him Sepperl. And so you got to wonder, is it Franz Joseph or Joseph? I'm guessing it's Joseph. Germans don't like to say J too much. So we'll just say it's Franz Joseph. As a boy, he was well-mannered and tidy. He liked to pretend he was playing the fiddle on 2 sticks of firewood. Well, as a start, when he was 6, he went to live with a schoolmaster cousin in the nearby town of Heinsberg. This man, Frank, was a stern teacher who thought that his pupils could learn anything if only he beat them often enough. Yikes. This teacher also gambled with loaded dice. HAYDN did learn from him at least enough to be accepted as a choir boy at St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna. He was auditioned by the choir master, George Ruder, who bribed him with cherries and taught him how to sing a trill. HAYDN said much later in life that he could never hear a trill without thinking of the taste of cherries. Little HAYDN was a good singer, but a bit of a prankster. One prank finally lost him his place. He snipped the pigtail off the boy in front of him, and Ruder kicked him out of the choir. It was just as well. His voice was beginning to break, and there was talk of castrating him. So there he was, 17 years old with just 3 worn shirts, a ragged jacket, and no money to his name. For the next few years, HAYDN lived a gypsy life as one of the many street musicians or buskers in the city of Vienna. He made a little extra money giving music lessons, just enough to pay the rent at his tiny garret on the Microplatz. Late at night, he studied the keyboard works of C.P.E. Bach and composed his own music. His first big break came when he and fellow buskers serenaded the house of Johann Joseph Kurtz, a comedian and pantomime performer popularly known as Kurtz of Bernardin, after his most famous role. Bernardin is a stock comic character, a simpleton also known as Hanswurst. Kurtz commissioned HAYDN to compose music for a comic opera, Der Krummteufel, the Crooked Devil. HAYDN got paid 25 ducats, which made him feel very rich. After that, things started looking up for HAYDN. The court poet Metastasio lived in a nicer apartment in the same building, and through him HAYDN met Niccolo Porpora, a famous singing teacher and composer. HAYDN became his accompanist and valet. But from Porpora, he learned not only fundamentals of composition, but also how to polish boots and keep the lint off a velvet jacket. Very useful techniques and trades. It was about this time that Haydn fell madly in love with one of his pupils, a lovely young woman named Therese Keller, a wigmaker's daughter. Haydn wanted to marry her, but she decided she wanted to become a nun instead. When she entered the convent in 1756, Haydn composed a little organ concerto for the ceremony, just to show that there were no hard feelings. As a sort of consolation prize, Therese's father suggested that Haydn can marry her older sister, Anna Maria. She was 31, he was 28. Too upset to think straight, he said yes. He lived to regret it. Anna Maria was ugly, ill-tempered, and a bad housekeeper. Shortly into the marriage, she became a born-again Christian and spent all hours entertaining clergymen in their home. Worst of all, she had no appreciation of Haydn's life as a musician. She didn't care whether he was a cobbler or a composer. She would use his manuscripts to line cake tins or cut the paper into strips to curl her hair with. As a final irony, Therese soon left the nunnery, but by then it was too late. So that really sucks. The girl that he really loved went to be a nun. He married her ugly older sister who was a bitch, and then right after he got married, the girl he really loved decided to leave the convent and become a normal person again. It's kind of bad for Haydn. Okay. Haydn had a simple antidote to the suffering. He fooled around. Oh. He later said he felt guilty about this since his wife was unable to bear children. First he fell in love with a singer named Luisa Polzelli, and they kept hoping her husband and his wife would die. Her husband did die, but Haydn's wife stuck around until 1800 when he was 68. Polzelli, meanwhile, had married somebody else. Haydn's second love he met while visiting London, another singer named Rebecca Schroeder. There were probably others. Through his connections with Porpora, Haydn soon got a job as a composer to the court of Count Morzin, a Bohemian nobleman. Okay. From there, he was offered the job to stay at for the rest of his life as court composer and Kapellmeister to Prince Paul Anton Esterházy, a Hungarian nobleman. Paul Anton didn't last long and was soon replaced by his brother Nicholas the Magnificent. Nicholas was a kind man and a decent musician, even if he did have a penchant for flashy clothing. Haydn's own uniform was blue with gold trim. Later it was red with gold trim. Nicholas liked to play an instrument called the baritone, which is sort of a cross between a cello and a guitar. Nobody makes them anymore, but if you wanted to learn it, Haydn wrote about 160 chamber pieces for the baritone, which ought to keep you busy for a while. Nicholas was an easy man to please. When he got angry, a new baritone trio would cheer him up. If that didn't, two usually would. Okay, so not content with the family palace at Eisenhut, Nicholas decided to build a splendid new summer castle, which he named Esterházy. He had it built in a swamp in the middle of nowhere because he was fond of duck hunting. Haydn also liked fishing and hunting. He once felled 3 birds with one shot. Okay, Esterházy was a classy place, but Haydn and his musicians didn't like being stuck in the boondocks, so far away from Vienna, not to mention their wives and husbands. The quarters were mostly single rooms. Haydn had one of the few apartments with room for his wife. Not that he spent any more time with her than he had to. This situation led Haydn to compose one of his best-known symphonies, number 45 in F sharp minor, known as the Farewell Symphony. The joke comes at the end of the final movement, when as the instrumental parts drop away, each player was instructed to snuff out his candle and leave the stage. By the end, there were only 2 violins playing, Haydn and Luigi Tomasini. Nicholas got the message and everyone packed to leave the next day. Haydn's compositions have more nicknames than those of any other composer in the history of music. When you consider that he wrote, for example, these 22 symphonies in D major, the nicknames become useful. Altogether, he wrote about 107 symphonies, a dozen masses, 52 piano sonatas, and about 84 string quartets. He had to have something to keep him out of the house at night. Even though his marriage was a disaster, Haydn had plenty else to be happy about. He was well respected by his contemporaries, including Mozart and Beethoven, who both studied with him. He charged Beethoven a nominal fee and let him pay for the coffee when they went out. The members of his orchestra also called him Papa. He had stubby legs and a big nose and a mischievous sense of humor. For example, he thought it was pretty funny when the Countess Morzin's blouse fell open as she turned the page during a lesson. That would be kind of funny. When Haydn died in 1809, there was a simple funeral, since Austria was rather busy being invaded by Napoleon's troops. Okay, that makes sense. So he died, not too much grandiosity going on because there was a war happening with French and Austria. A couple of amateur medical students secretly stole Haydn's skull and put it in a little black box with a white silk cushion. They wanted to read the bumps on his head. In 1829, Prince Nicholas Esterhazy II had the body exhumed. When he found that it had no head, boy was he mad. He finally tracked down the thieves and demanded it back. They had donated Haydn's skull to Viennese Music Society and gave him some other skull instead. It wasn't until 1954 that Haydn's head was buried along with the rest of his body. Other than that, though, he was a pretty together guy. Gulp. Very interesting about Haydn. Okay, that was our story time today, kids. So you may even already be asleep right now as you listen to the sound of my voice. And until next time, this has been Kurt Thompson with Storytime and Music History 101.